I think we have mics. Oh, yeah. And we will see it on YouTube forever. Oh, I have them right. Yeah, I have them right here. Here's July and here's September. You want to look at it? Okay. I think that's July, this September. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't here.
I wasn't here for July. So,
So I don't have to.
yep, nope.
Oh, was it 3:44?
Yeah. All right. Where did Elizabeth go? Are we ready?
Yes, and we're recording.
Oh,
Yes,
good.
Everything's good.
All right. Welcome to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, for Monday, December 16th, 2024, in the Princeton Municipal Building, 400 Witherspoon Street, pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act. Adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting was given by posting prominently on the official bulletin board in the municipal complex, 400 Witherspoon Street, a schedule of the regular meetings of the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission for the year 2024, which posting is to be maintained throughout the year, and by transmitting a copy of such schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, Trenton Times, and Comcast Cable of New Jersey, and by filing a copy thereof with the clerk of Princeton, New Jersey. Elizabeth, do you want to take the roll call?
Yes. Ms. Satterfield? Mr. Shatskin? Here. Ms. Howard? Here. Mr. Pyle? Here. Mr. Endersby?
I'm here.
Ms. Friedman? Mr. Shore? Here. Chairperson Capozzoli?
Here. Thank you for coming, and please help yourself to food and seconds and thirds. Announcements. Just want to say our meeting in January is on the 8th and 9th, which is a Wednesday, and if we need to meet, a Thursday in this room. And we will go over the rest of the schedule later. But I just wanted to point that out. Elizabeth, did you have any other announcements?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to remind the commission, I had sent an email out previously about Sustainable Home Expo, which is on March 8th, and they had reached out to us again to see if we would like to participate. I know that Roger and Charlotte had sat at the table last year, and they had some handouts, and a lot of people appreciated that. The time is from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Princeton High School, so they do have a deadline date of January 10th for us to let them know if someone would like to participate.
All right, thank you. All right, under administrative matters, we have resolutions regarding the Open Public Meetings Act. The first is the 2025 schedule of the meetings calendar. That was in our packet. So I don't think I need to read through any of that. The second is the notice of special meetings. And the third is charges to subscribers for meeting notices. So we can vote on all three at once, is that correct?
Yes, and I just wanted to remind the commission that this calendar is one that starts at 5 o'clock, and it's in the main meeting room. I just want the commission to realize that it's not at 4. We had talked about that, unless that you want to have a change
Just for January?
for the
No,
whole year.
for the whole year, 5 o'clock in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep,
all
and I
right.
did check with the clerk. Obviously, the council's agenda isn't finalized, but I looked at their draft, so we chose the dates that it didn't appear that there would be a conflict with them.
So part of the reason is that this gets recorded, and then taking minutes is much easier because you can watch the video. It just makes it a whole lot easier for everybody. All right. With that, those 3 documents, would someone like to make a motion? Okay. Thank you, Tom. It's been moved by Tom, seconded. Seconded by Roger. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The second is appointment of the nominating committee. And I would like to make a motion to appoint Frida and Charlotte to the nominating committee. Is there a second? Thank you, Tom. I guess you could do a roll call vote.
Sure. Mr. Shatskin? Ms. Howard?
Yeah, you can vote.
Mr. Pyle? Mr. Endersby?
Yep.
Mr. Shore? Chairperson Capizoli?
Yes. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. Now we have the minutes. I think the first one is July 15th. That was a special meeting. Was that a special meeting?
Let's
Anyway,
see.
I wasn't there. So I'll tell you who can vote on it. Elric, Shirley's not here. Elric, David, wow, only Elric and David can vote on the minutes because nobody else was there. So,
Is that a real meeting or subcommittee or?
yeah, it was a real meeting.
It's a regular
following.
meeting. It was July
We're the
15th.
only two who are here and we're there. I
Yeah,
get it.
exactly. So,
Well, I
do you
don't
want to
wanna-
move to approve the
I will
minutes?
also move.
I'm sorry,
So-
what was that, David? I did understand from what we've had situations with Ed that you don't need a quorum to approve minutes. Yeah, it could just be, okay.
Right, okay. So it's been moved by Elric and seconded by David to approve the minutes. Yeah. I guess so, roll call.
Mr. Endersby?
Aye, aye.
Mr. Shore?
Okay, thank you. All right, the September meeting, we had more people that day. On this one, myself, Elric, David, Roger, and Tom. We can all vote on the minutes for September. And I believe everybody got a copy of these minutes in the packet. So with that said, would someone like to move the approval of the minutes for September 18th? Thank you, Tom. Just one correction. It says September 2023, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Right,
Ian, correct? I think that was September 23. Yes.
right,
And the other
okay.
one was July 2024.
Time flies when you're having fun. Okay. All right, it's been moved by Tom, seconded by, we have Elric, David, Roger. This is for the September 2023 minutes. September 18th, 2023. Yeah,
So at this meeting was the 28 Edge Hill, to remind people what was
Oh,
on that
okay.
application.
right. Waiting for a second.
Roger, could you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, we were waiting, I believe, on this one for the commission's disposition to be included in the minutes. I think we looked at these last time.
Were there any changes? I mean, we could just take it into January. That's fine.
I don't think that I think that we just wanted to make sure that it was correct because of the application. I think that we just wanted the information to be correct on it. That's why it was carried.
Okay, so the section that Ed Schmier would add, or provide a memo was added? Does Ian know that?
What page are you referring to?
Page 4 at the bottom. It's in
Okay.
italics. Third from the bottom paragraph. I believe that was added.
Oh. HBC's public comment for Edge Hill?
Or Ed Schmier will provide a memo. Which
Yeah,
one?
right.
Oh, Edgemere will probably remember those.
Yeah, there was just, the previous minutes just had a kind of blanket statement that the HBC had responded, but there was no indication of what the response is. So I think this is accurate
Okay,
currently, so I would vote for it.
if it's,
I'll second it.
I think it's accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're waiting a second, I'll provide that.
All right, yes. So, all right, so the ones who can vote, myself, Elric, David, Roger, and Tom. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Four-part harmony.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, thank you. All right, now we are moving on.
Julie, a quick question.
Yes,
Since it refers to Ed's memo, is that available among planning board documents?
well, zoning board, I
Or that
think,
was zoning board?
yeah,
Just, I mean, in case somebody wanted to follow up and see what,
yeah. I could probably send you a copy of the memo.
no, that's fine. I just want to know as long as it's publicly available, I'm fine.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yep. All right, we have a resolution of the Princeton Nursery School, 78 Lee Avenue. This was emailed a couple days ago. It looked totally fine to me. Would someone like to move to approve the resolution? Oh, thanks, David. Second?
I second.
Thanks, Roger. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right. With no further ado, we will go to the application of King Interest LLC, 342 and 338 Nassau Street, building addition with variances and historic preservation plan review, Jugtown Historic District, Block 3401, lots 14 and 32, and then it has a bunch of numbers. Okay. Elizabeth, did you want to start summarizing your report, and then we'll go to swear in the applicants?
Of course. So the applicant, King Interest LLC, has filed a major site plan application with variances and an application for historic preservation plan review for improvements on the two adjacent properties identified as 338 Nassau Street, Block 34.01, Lot 32, and 342 Nassau Street, Block 34.01, Lot 14, in the ROB Residential Office Zoning District. The two properties are in the local and state and National Register of Historic Places, Jugtown Historic District. They are also in the New Jersey National Register of Historic Places, Kings Highway Historic District, which is a 66-foot wide district right-of-way along Nassau Street, also known as State Highway 206. So the applicant proposes to add a one-story addition to the back of the existing building at 342 Nassau Street. And 342 is actually the property that sits on the corner of Nassau and North Harrison. So to do the addition, the applicant is required to remove a portion of the exterior wall and rear porch. Other improvements include an existing parking lot which will be reconfigured to accommodate this addition, and the driveway will extend to the adjoining lot 388, which is adjacent, so that they can have access between the two parking lots. Shared amenities between these two properties also will include the construction of a new plaza and the new pedestrian vehicular access between the plaza and the parking area. Other improvements include restoration and maintenance work on the existing historic building at 342 Nassau. Jugtown is classified as Type 2 district on the Princeton Historic Preservation District and buffers, and I think that most of the commission members are aware of this. Can you hear me, Elric?
I hear the reverberation, and every once in a while I recognize a word.
I'm sorry.
It's not you, it's this room.
Most commission members are going to recall Jugtown only because I believe this summer we had reviewed the property which was across the street, which is 344. So a lot of the history of this you should be aware of, so I don't want to reiterate that, but I'm happy to go over it if someone has a question about it. The applicant has provided demolition noticing according to section 10B380, subsection B5, and section 10B390. That information was provided to Mr. Herbert, and he finds that they are in order, and we can
Correct.
take jurisdiction of this application. So 342 Nassau Street, I think that many of you will recall, this application came before HPC a while back when it was Eastridge Design. And there were improvements that she had proposed on the property. And we had gone over a lot of the history of this building. As we had talked about that time, there was a section of the building that was on the east side, which was removed to reconfigure the road there, which was Ewing. And the addition, or what we call the wing addition, is added to the left side of the house. This is one of the oldest properties within Princeton. It's pre-revolutionary, as many of the ones at this intersection are. So it is very significant, and this intersection is very significant to Jugtown. And the the property at 388, as you may recall, that was reviewed by HPC as well, which was, I think that came in as King Construction, same applicant really. And he did a partial demolition in the rear, in addition to an addition and reconfiguring their parking lot and doing restoration on the exterior of the building. So the applicant owns both those properties. What he'd like to do is he'd like to have access between the two by the extension of that driveway. His proposal is to move the driveway, I believe, 27 feet north of where it currently exists, to be able to do the reconfiguration for the parking. With that, he is going to need to relocate a utility pole and the services that are on there. With the reconfiguration and connection to the two properties, currently, they both have ingress and egress out. With the proposed plan, the ingress and egress from 342 will continue to be 2A. However, from 388, it will only be egress with no left turn onto Nassau Street. And I believe that the applicant will probably be able to have their engineer talk about that and discuss the reasoning for that. I believe it's to reduce the traffic impact. Okay, so let's just go on to what else there is here. The new parking configuration is going to accommodate 6 spaces, one of which will be an ADA parking stall and loading area. The existing ADA space at 388 will be converted to a standard space instead now. And again, as we talked about, there are these amenities which are shared, which is the new plaza that's going to be constructed, pedestrian vehicular access, a bike rack which is going to be in the plaza area, and the trash, which is the enclosure that has the generator, which sits on 388 property. So the plaza sits between the two shared side property lines. It has a semicircular design with a fountain in the middle. The material of the sidewalk, except for the section just by the circle, that's concrete. The rest of it are sidewalk pavers. And we have a sample of everything that we can pass around. There's going to be a bike rack next to the plaza, and that's going to be covered. The current trash, which services the residential unit on 342, which is located in the back, is going to be removed, again, as stated, because all the trash is going to be collectively used in the building that houses the generator and trash currently for 388. In addition, there are 2 AC units that are behind the wing addition that will be relocated to the west side of the building with a new enclosure in it. And that is really to redesign the plaza, the circulation for the parking and the addition. There will be a new AC condenser that's installed for the new construction of the addition, which is going to be on the east side of the building, and that'll also have an enclosure. So I actually could not find the square footage of the building, but it's not that large. It's intended to be a conference space, in addition to, I believe, a restroom facility in there, connecting it to the existing historic building. And I don't know if you want me to go through the details of the building, or if you want to move forward with the applicant, we can come back to this as well. But I'll just briefly talk about, so the building has a base foundation. It's going to have a stone foundation. We have a sample here. They also provided a mortar color that is supposed to be used with the stonework. The windows are going to be aluminum windows, which are the Weather Shield Premium Series. The windows on the west side are going to be 6/6 double hung with a transom above it, which also has a 6/6 fixed transom unit. And on the east side, there's going to be one of those in addition to the clerestory windows, which are just 3 by 2 feet 6 inches, so it's a much smaller profile on that side. The roof is going to be a gable roof standing seam metal roof, and they propose 3 white decorative roof brackets evenly spaced along that north elevation. There is a small connector piece from the existing building to this addition, which is going to be just a flat roof membrane attached to the two. All the gutters are going to be 5-inch white aluminum gutters. The door on the addition is a faux carriage door with embedded glass windows, and there'll be 2 sets of double doors for those. On the west elevation, there is a 15-pane single door with multi-pane transom and one-sided transom. I'm sorry, one-sided side light. And door and window casings are going to be wood grain millwork, and that's going to be used for the casing door. The stucco, so the question that kept on coming up is, I didn't really know what color the stucco was. I believe the intent is for the house at 342 Nassau and the addition to be the same color as 388. There was just a lot of different color names and samples, so I'm going to defer to the applicant to talk about that. The one question I did have is I wasn't sure if that color is the same as the color of the 3 buildings at the intersection and the previous color of 342. So it was just kind of difficult because I didn't have anything to compare it with. And that is an important component because I know that when that house was painted, the darker color, it was a surprise. The color really unifies that intersection, and my understanding was that it was intended to be returned back, but maybe not exactly the same color. Improvements to the existing house, there's the main house, there's a wing addition, and then there is the, that's it, sorry. So the main house, the gable roof is going to be replaced in kind. Right now it's standing seam. The house will be painted the same colors we talked about as the house at 388. They're going to repaint the window trim, and they are going to replace, they're going to replace shutters if need be and repaint them as well. And that's going to be in black forest green. And the biggest improvement is really going to be the front porch steps and railing. They're going to remove everything except for the foundation on the landing itself, and they're going to be replacing it with the foundation for the steps are going to be a CMU block foundation, reinforced grout. The landing itself will remain that foundation. The balustrades will be removed and replaced with an aluminum railing system. And at the landing, they talk about the height of the railings are 2 feet 10 inches. And the railing system will be painted the same black forest green as the shutters with a powder finish. The steps are going to have a brick riser, and then it will have a slate tread. And it'll also have a slate landing as well. And on the wing addition, the existing roof will be painted to match the new roof on the main house. They'll replace the siding with Western hemlock beveled siding to match existing siding dimensions, and they propose to paint that again the same color as 388 Nassau. They're going to be adding new steps in the back of the building, and as we talked about, the AC units are going to be relocated to the west side with an enclosure. I'm just going to kind of briefly go through this because there is actually a lot of detail with this project. There is, as part of the site improvements, they are going to need to take down 39 the European hornbeam, which lies.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
So, yes, they're going to remove the 39-row of European hornbeam, which was part of the East Ridge design, which lined the side property line. And then they were going to add some additional new planting in the rear of the building, foundation planting around that, foundation planting also in the rear west cottage, and behind the property, the parking lot, so the rear property line. There are 2 existing 3-inch caliber dogwood. They're proposed to transplant, and they're going to be on either side of the addition. One is going to be closer to the driveway, and the other one's going to be closer to the plaza area. They have 4 types of lighting. They have a wall-mounted sconce. They have one area lighting, which is a kind of like a pole parking lot lighting. They have a recessed down lighting, and they have a bollard lighting as well. And there are a variety of variances and waiver reliefs that they're requesting, and I would prefer to perhaps leave this for Mr. Kennedy to talk about. I did not have the benefit of a memo from the zoning officer, the engineer, so I might get it wrong, but I did have comments on it that I can discuss later. I think one of the things that I did ask the applicant to do is to kind of discuss what that shared special treatment.
So I'll be honest, in prepping for this, we weren't quite sure what that meant. There's a comment about a variance for the center court area, I think is what you described?
I understood that from the zoning engineering, that was something that was going to kind of come up, but I actually never heard of it before, so I thought maybe it was part of the open space.
If there's a variance required for that element, it hasn't been brought to our attention yet, and I know our planner and engineer has been discussing this with Dan Weissman extensively. We'll explain the unrelated and quirky open space requirement. There's a pre-existing condition about the size of open space that apartments need to have, and that's not something that's changed, nor is it related to the, if you want to call it the improvements between the 2 buildings. So if there is, perhaps it's a preview for us from Dan, maybe through you, that maybe there'll be something coming, a comment from him or a possible
And I wasn't
variance,
sure if it was a variance or a design standard.
If there is, it's not one we've identified or been made
I didn't
aware of
see it on
yet.
your list,
Yeah.
correct, thank you. So what I'd like to do is I'm just going to go through to the comments and recommendations. And as I stated, we did not have the engineering zoning report, we didn't have the municipal landscape architect's report, and we didn't have the traffic consultant's report. If this project is classified as a major site, that actually triggers many things. But this is not one of them. The preservation area, we had talked about this 344, and I think that is important, particularly for corner lots, because they're so open, and it really does create a change to the property and the historic character of that property as well. So that is one of the things that we did not see. We feel that should be something that should be part of a discussion that HPC has, and perhaps discuss an area of preservation, which we had also talked about for the other applicant. And again, it's because it's such a visible corner. Many times when an applicant is doing work in the rear yard, you really can't see as much because, as you know, HPC encourages development to be in the rear of the property. Unfortunately, this rear is their side yard as well, or it could also be considered the front yard, even though it's not classified that way. When I looked at the replacement of the front stairs, I just needed the applicant to verify how much it was deteriorated to demolish the whole thing. I think we had talked about replacement of material, within the last couple of months, how applicants should try to repair it if possible instead of just replacing it. So I guess we'd like to know how deteriorated it is, and why, if it needs to be replaced, could it not be done in kind versus the material that currently does not exist. There was a bike rack, but we did not see the canopy, and I think that that's important to us because that will be visible from Nassau Street, and we just like to know what that looks like. The Kings Highway District line should be shown on the plan. There is a bunch of questions for the applicant, which is under number 8, so I'm going to go to number 9, which really is for the commission to think about and recommend recommendations that I'm making for them and for you to decide, you know, how you want to go with that. I'm going to start with the first one, which is the new condenser we just installed on the, sorry, it actually should be on the east side of the building, is in public view. I would recommend, if possible, for that to be relocated to the west side, which is more internal and not visible. And with that, right now, they are required to have a variance for that because their enclosure is considered an accessory structure, and it violates the setback. And as you know, the addition and the existing building itself is very close to the road, to the right-of-way. So that is going to violate. So if there's any opportunity to be able to relocate to the west side of the building, that would be better. Let's see. There were questions I had about the addition. The addition is a one-story gable roof, which is fairly modest in size, but however, as we talked about, it is a corner lot which is open. It has frontage onto Harrison Street, and it's very close to the roadway, as the existing building is. Typically, HPC likes additions to be set back. You don't want to take the visual significance away from the historic building. And even though this has a small footprint, it's so close that it's, as you're traveling either way, it's, your attention is not going to go to the original historic building, but you're going to be looking at this building. And one of the reasons that you might be looking at is because they do have these double sets of doors on the back, which seem a bit out of character for the structure itself, and it doesn't seem to relate well to the historic building in addition. And I would say that that would also be the case of the 6/6 with the transom 6-pane windows above it. I would feel that if they wanted a larger window, I would prefer to see a larger window instead of make it look like a double hung with the transom on top of it. It just looks busy for a small building where the original historic building is not that busy. So I think that those are just some considerations that the applicant should consider as far as making the structure itself be more compatible to the historic building and sympathetic, in addition to considering stepping the building back, again, because that might also alleviate one of your variances, which is the side and combined side yard setback. And when the project is classified, if it is classified as a major site, that is when there is a requirement for archaeological protocol. Because we know that there was some archaeological findings at 344, we think that that would really be worthy of carrying that out and having that thought about in a preliminary analysis. So I'm going to leave it at that. We can come back to it, but I know the applicant has a lot to talk about, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And just to clarify, this is definitely going to the planning board,
Yes.
right? So we would be advising
Yes.
for that. Okay, Mr. Hurt, do you want to swear everybody in?
Sure. Mr. Kennedy, good evening. I see you have two witnesses who we have seen before. If we could just state for the record who they are, and we will swear everybody in.
Absolutely. We'll start with my right, your left with our architect.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Thomas Fantacone. I'm an architect in the state of New Jersey since 1981.
Thank you. And your Engineer.
James Kamalak, Chmielak, Kensho Resources, 360 Nassau Street.
Thank you. Gentlemen, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do,
Both are sworn
yes.
for the record, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could we just ask the architect to spell his name for the record?
It's Thomas Fantacone, F as in Frank, Antacone.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you so much, members of the board, and Elizabeth for your introduction and memo. We did prepare some slides. I did learn last month that the screen doesn't always work. I don't know if there's a button to turn it on. We can give that a try. If not, I do have paper copies I'm happy to hand out, but maybe we'll give the electronic version a... It did seem to flutter on earlier this evening.
Yeah, I saw them on before, so I think we're going to be able to see it on the screen.
Again, if not, I'm happy to pass out printed versions.
Thank you for,
I am.
oh,
There we go.
here it is.
Let there be light.
Yay.
All right.
It works.
Thank you, and to thank the great Oz back behind the curtain for fixing our screen for us. Thank you so much. Again, Ryan Kennedy from Stevens and Lee here for the applicant King Interests. As Ms. Kim said, these properties have been coming in for various HPC approvals over the years. Most recently with 338, that's the building on the left. First, a kind of a significant renovation and revision to the back of the site. And then a few years later, as that project wrapped up, a lot of discussion about the generator and trash enclosure in the back that actually came in as a separate modification and application for that as well. Coming out of that process, actually from some of the town's professionals, was this hope that the ownership would be able to take control of the property on the corner, which they now have, and that there'd be some benefits from a site perspective, ingress and egress, in combining the parking lots from an accessibility perspective. So we've looked at that for a couple of years, and the plan here would essentially move the entrance on Harrison further away from Nassau to create more queuing space, make it easier and safer to get in and out, and then by connecting the two to give another option. In discussing with staff, the plans might note, as you've looked at them at the moment, that the Nassau Street would be restricted to egress. I think in talking with staff, they're going to have some comments about that, and I think it's more likely that the ultimate plan would be keep in and out at both places. But I want to say stay tuned. Physically, we're not looking to change the Nassau driveway, but in working with the town's engineers, they're not done with their thinking on it yet. We kind of expect that in and out might be the best solution at both, creating the most flexibility and reducing the most conflicts with that intersection. Similarly, Ms. Kim noted there's a telephone pole kind of that would need to be relocated. The town is in discussions with some perhaps telephone related people that might change that up a little bit as well. Not the location, but whether there would be a pole there or not. And we're going to be in those conversations as they happen. But ultimately, the desire is to move that entrance back significantly from the corner for safety and egress. The rest of the program are essentially somewhere between maintenance and updates of the corner property. Again, as Ms. Kim said, the intention on our end is to restore the color to what's appropriate for the four corners. And how to word this as a condition. There has been a lot of confusion about the exact name of that color, and there's a lot of iterations to get to it, I think, for 338. Our understanding is that the 338 and 341 are in fact the same, but we're happy to work with staff to match the correct version versus the ones across the other, I don't know what the word is, kittywampus, across the other corners to make sure that they all perfectly match. And then the addition behind to allow for a conference room for the commercial uses on the corner, and some site improvements as we connect the two parking lots. I seem to have touched my computer awkwardly. That caused it to, so I will not do that again. I'm going to go through our slides. I'm going to start with Mr. Kamalek, our site engineer, just to orient you guys. The blue arrow here, Jim, right, that's pointing towards the site on the town zoning map.
Correct, yes.
And then going to the next slide, we've got our historic map with the Juddtown district shown at number 17 with the bubbly kind of purple.
Yeah, so it's within this particular area on the historic map.
Next, we have some overheads that we got to showing the, what I'll say is the existing condition, but actually this existing condition predates some of the work at 338 from these photos. So these are meant more for general orientation. Jim, you want to just quick describe a little bit what we're looking at here?
Sure. So 342 is that corner property in the, basically next to the traffic light, the gray building. You can see the silver roof with the existing parking lot and patio area to the rear. And you can see that that parking lot in the existing condition is gravel, which is consistent with the pre-existing condition of adjacent 338, as well as consistent with the previously approved site plan for 338. And the intent here was to maintain that consistency for several reasons: aesthetics, number one, also two, from a drainage and infiltration, stormwater management standpoint. Having less impervious surface or a more permeable type surface has its own benefits. So we're proposing our plan with rehabilitating the parking area and slightly reorienting it so that you can see at the rear of 342 where the vehicles are facing Harrison Street, then they would be basically facing the rear property line, and then also the subject building with the ingress and egress drive aisle in between them. And I also would like to point out the proximity of this gravel parking lot to the immediate rear of the existing sidewalk. So that parking area and the vehicles currently have the ability to, they're unencumbered in proximity to that sidewalk, and that gravel goes all the way up to the edge. So we feel that this reorientation will provide a more effective parking area from an ingress and egress standpoint, and also bring safety to the pedestrian sidewalk that's there, in excess of what's there today.
So our next slide kind of is side orientation again prior to the revisions to 338. Jim,
And then that drive, you can see on Harrison Street in the lower right-hand portion, the existing apron would be shifted slightly to the right. And if you extrapolated that slid to the right apron, you can see the access can easily be made to 338. And this would, instead of each property being accessed by only one driveway apron with both in and out traffic, it would provide duplicity in that, and multiple options to get in and out of the property from a volume standpoint. Even though the anticipated parking demand is extremely low on this property, that's another benefit of providing two egresses.
So next we've got this is the existing conditions here at the current sites together.
Yes, and that's basically what we saw in the previous slide of the aerial. The previously planted hornbeam screening trees you can see along that common property line that provided a barrier when there were different owners of the property. Since then, I think it was at the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021, Mr. King did obtain title to 342 Nassau, subject to this application, with the intent of making some improvements and facilitating the connection here. So relative to those trees, a good portion of them would require removal in order to make that connection and also facilitate the open hardscaping space or courtyard area that Ms. Kim referred to in the central portion of the property. But I would note that you know, the applicant is certainly open to, where possible, maintaining several of those hornbeam trees as we're able to as part of the site plan. And specifically, there are several that are in the rear of the site next to the utility enclosure building that was recently built, and those trees that are on the top side of that building, as maybe Ryan can highlight there, we would maintain those at a minimum. Obviously, they can't be in the drive aisle or in the hardscaping area, but if they're, you know, what we can maintain, we would make an effort to do that.
So next, we've got the proposed site plan, and we're going to take the board through this.
Sure. So if you can see the existing building, 342, outlined in black, shaded with white. And then to the rear of that, our one-story addition in orange, which will butt up against the rear wall. And you can see the unique property line configuration along Harrison Street, which is on an angle. So we have this transitioning of a side yard at that location. The existing building is, I think, within a foot or so, or a foot and a half of the property line. That setback has been increased slightly at 3.6 with this orientation, so that that addition can align properly with the existing building. And in the central portion where they meet at the courtyard area, you can see that there's an access to the new one-story addition, an access doorway right here that would enable ADA access to that new space, where currently the ADA access is restricted to the building, so that's another element. And then the dwelling unit to the right of that on the existing building, that access would also be maintained and facilitated through ingress from the courtyard area. To the left, as I mentioned, we have several parking stalls on each side of the access driveway connecting to the neighboring property. And then as part of this, in order to obtain some efficiency with the parking, we have an ADA stall that would be utilized by both structures on the property, and this would also be facilitated with cross-access easements, both vehicular and pedestrian, as part of a site plan approval. And we have provided some pedestrian pathways to get from one parcel across that driveway to the other, and then in the vicinity of the courtyard area as well, tying into that entrance on 338, the existing building at the bottom.
So, Jim, a couple of comments or questions from me. I believe Ms. Kim, one of her comments was the one air conditioner condenser that was, considered for the Harrison side street of the building. We saw that comment and talked it through, and that's something we can relocate, either eliminate or relocate to the area where the other condensers are, more kind of internal to the site plan.
Correct, yeah. We can do that. It was placed there just because we were trying to maximize the planting area in the vicinity of the bike rack and the AC units, but if it's preferred for it to be internal, we can look at relocating that.
Also, I think there's a question about the number of ADA spaces. I guess by having a combined site plan, the requirement, I guess, would be for one total space, but it gets to be in a more central location and actually closer to the 338 building than would have otherwise been.
Right, and they would be accessible to both buildings with an accessible route from that parking location.
And then shown in green here is, I guess, the markup or proposed of the preservation area. If this were to be deemed a major site plan, that's where we would propose
yeah, we put
designating.
this together. We heard the comment and understood that it's likely going to be a requirement to delineate an area. So the idea here was to include the existing historic structure as well as the periphery yards associated with it, both on Nassau Street and fronting on Harrison Street, and then that small side yard adjacent to 338.
And maybe while we're on this slide, there are several variances and design waivers required. Ultimately, the setback variance is actually one that is less than the existing condition for the new addition. I think there was some question about whether this connecting kind of paver courtyard element required a particular variance, and not one that you're aware of. Maybe you could explain briefly the existing condition that we have to reintroduce to the planning board, but of the open space requirement for the existing apartment.
Yeah, for the existing apartment, just from a zoning standpoint, we did provide on our plan that it does comply with the open courtyard area for the minimum space. The only issue is that where a minimum of 20-foot minimum linear distance of that open space is required, we have almost 15 feet. So there's a sort of a dimensional restriction of the width of that. And on other projects that has been approved by the board, but it does meet the overall gross square footage with this outdoor accessory area.
And ultimately, that's not a condition that's really changed from the existing conditions. It's gotten a little better.
Right, yes.
And I think the other, excuse me, waivers are really, with the setbacks to the back for parking, those are again kind of existing conditions, but ones that we're, by kind of cleaning up that area, formalizing.
Yes, that's correct. We're trying to maximize setback to the property lines while still providing enhanced parking arrangement, which when compared to that existing plan and aerial photo, you can see that this is much better from an arrangement standpoint. So there are some elements of design waivers and relief just with the parking stalls and the setbacks relative to that.
And then here we've got a kind of a side-by-side before and after of the proposed changes and reallocation of the back of the building.
Correct. So that addition is really located partially over that porch, egress stair, and that walkway at the rear of the parking lot.
And I believe, yep, so I touched the computer the wrong way. Let's see if it comes back in a second.
Sorry.
I wish I could explain that or have that type of power over other things in my life, but there we go. So the next slide, again, kind of a side-by-side showing where the addition is over the existing patio that would be removed. And I believe with the stones from that, with the proposal would be to repurpose those stones for the revised front porch if that were to be approved for construction.
I believe so, and our architect can also speak to some of the details of that front porch repair.
Our next slide, I'll kind of switch from Jim over to Tom, and he can start talking a little bit about what our plans with the existing building are.
Sure. Thank you. Well, kind of in a nutshell, what we're doing is with this structure, relating it very closely to 338. So there's a sense that there's a cohesiveness, sort of a complex of buildings that relate to one another and relate to the other buildings on the various corners. So the stucco of this building would be painted. We're calling it white down, but it's really going to be probably a special mixture paint that doesn't have a name. It'll probably have a number, but it'll be related to what was used on 338, which we know what that was, so we can replicate it here. We're also treating the shutters with a dark green paint, black forest green, and the roof will be sort of a charcoal gray, dark gray, again to relate to the colors used on 338. The residential pavilion to the left, connected to the main house, the clapboard is somewhat decaying, but we'll make every attempt to try to save it as we get in there and kind of look at what it looks like right now. We'll determine what can be done, maybe either to save it or replace it in kind. The front porch and stairs, where we're looking to reuse the bluestone or flagstone from the rear of the property, bringing it to the front here to reuse it. We had proposed more metal-type railings, aluminum, because they're easier to maintain. But I think the client would be amenable to looking at possibly trying to repair what's already there, if it's repairable. If not, we would try to replace it in kind. So this is on the right side is an elevation of the facade of the building facing the new conference room facing Harrison. The building itself is somewhat taller because the main structures are up about 30 inches above grade, but the entrance into this new pavilion, I'll call it, is at grade. So it's already a little bit taller. So these transom windows provide light on this side of the building, but kind of keep it sort of protected, I guess, from the traffic on Harrison. And you can see the main house really is pretty blank on that facade as well.
So, John, just, so this dash line here, that's actually the floor height as it
That-
relates to those?
Well, that's, no, actually, let's see. Well, I think that's the floor height of the main building.
Okay,
Yeah.
understood.
So our grade level is actually below that. This indicates that the HVAC equipment will be on the western side, and we will screen it with a screen made of the same materials as the building itself, and then paint it the same color.
I know you said you would make every effort to save the siding, but I think this is probably a good view to show some of the condition there.
Yeah, that's correct. This is a view of the west facade, sort of facing the 338 building. And the reason for the transoms really are because it's a taller space, as I mentioned, because the access to this is at grade, so it'll be barrier-free into this new addition. And then to get to the main house, you're going up, 5 or 6 stairs, I think 5 stairs, to get up to about 30 inches, which is the elevation of the first floor of the main house. So the new conference room has a taller ceiling. It's a kind of a taller structure. So we use the transom glass above the 6x6 lights to kind of, so that facade didn't look a little bare. And the windows, the 6x6 windows would look a little squatty, I think, because of that pavilion being slightly taller. So that's sort of the reason for that. But we can look at maybe other ways of treating it, as we get into the design more fully. But one other thing I just wanted to mention is that the angles of the roof match the angles of the existing building, so there'll be a cohesive quality to the structures. This is a view of the rear of the main building as it exists today, and of course our new addition will be sort of connected to the back of the building, and that steps and patio would be removed. This is the north facade of the building, and the idea was to try to replicate a carriage house, if you will. So these would be faux carriage house doors on that side. That was sort of the intent. I know there's some concern that maybe it's a little bit maybe too busy a facade, and again, we can look at these things, but the notion here was to create the idea that the addition is sort of a carriage house.
The next slide, we've got some example details of the court in between the two buildings.
That's correct, yes.
And this is a similar, from the drawings, I think it's a little hard to see whether it be an upright fountain or not. It would really be a water feature that is set within the stones. There would not be bollards, but ultimately one that can be turned off and would just be a flat
That's correct.
ground. One of the questions was, how high of a projection or spray there might be. Is this going to be like the Woodrow Wilson School, where people are playing in the fountain, and ultimately it's something that's controllable.
That's
and
correct,
could be
yes.
Turned off and be very minimal or not at all.
That's correct, yes.
Again, we've got the side-by-side here of existing in photo and the proposed changes in between. Before we wrap up, we can go through a couple of comments and questions. Jim, there was a question about the curbing. ultimately, in the approval for 338, I guess it was in compliance that, for stone driveways, I understand that the corralling the stone always is an interest, otherwise, every year as you're plowing it, it kind of expands. So we were requested to add in curbing to kind of keep the stone in place, and that was approved then, and that's the treatment we propose for the combined site.
That's correct.
Ms. Kim, wanted to say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're talking about 388, right?
338.
Oh, sorry,
338,
338. Oh, okay, sorry. Too many numbers. And that's the second house from the corner, right?
Right.
Okay.
This is 338 here.
Okay, so I remember the design actually came in with no curbing. And I
Right.
believe the zoning board requested for the curbing to be put in addition to, I think, that drainage that you had at the driveway.
Right.
But the condition was that it was supposed to be concrete and not Belgian block. And the whole thing is curb Belgian block. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
different thing, and I understand why you'd want to make it Belgian block now because it was done there. But Belgian block typically is not a material that you would consider a historic material that you would use even, as you're doing improvements. You usually use concrete, or sometimes you might use like a asphalt curb because it's neutral. And that's the only reason I said if you needed to put the curbing in, which I'm sure it's because of engineering,
Right.
that concrete would be a better material choice. And if there's an area that you didn't need it, then I would encourage HBC to support that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the original plan was to avoid the expense entirely, and I'd say that the engineers had a different idea for us, but ultimately,
Right, and I think that it once you start curbing things, it looks very suburban.
All right, thank you.
some questions about lighting. The 338 building is currently on timers, and this can be set to match. Jim, I believe there's a couple other technical questions about the lighting that we can either address or be sure that we do.
Yeah, I think there were some details that we can address on a revised plan. One of the fixtures mounted on the building, I believe there's an overhang for one of those recessed lights, and then we had one on the facade of the building, but if there's an issue with anchoring that recessed light on that facade, we'll just look at an alternative fixture. that
Okay, I
you're
just didn't
happy with.
realize it had an overhang. I was like, how
Yeah.
did they put that on the wall?
The one
Thank you.
does, yeah.
Apologies, I'm sure we've missed something. We haven't had a ton of time to go through this, but
But I think we hit a lot of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
happy to follow up or answer any of the questions that we may have missed. We did try to get through as many of the comments as possible.
All right, well, thank you. We are probably going to focus quite a bit on the addition building, although, we can always weigh in on parking arrangements, and we will have public comment right after the board deliberation. So I did want to give Elric a chance first, because he was very organized and wrote out his comments.
Thank you. I've had a very difficult time hearing, so I missed a lot, and I apologize if I'm repetitious or if I would somehow miss the gist of some of your presentation. As a board, my first thought is, here we go again, and we've been here before recently. as the HPC, we have a lot of different districts, 21 in fact, very different districts, very different discussions, very different decisions that we make. Out of all of those, some of them are decisions based on neighborhoods and landscaping and cohesiveness within a community. Occasionally, though, we do get some that really affect important architecture and important structures reflecting our local history here, and this is one. Once again, it is in Jugtown, and that's what we've dealt with a lot this year. And it's in Jugtown, it really is a building that was built in Jugtown before there was a Jugtown, because there wasn't a quarry there wasn't a quarry or a brick-making possibility within that area. It has a lot to do with Princeton history before there was a Princeton and before we had a history. It goes back all the way back to Lenni Lenape Trail through central New Jersey, which became the Kings Highway. It dates probably to the same decade when Princeton first got a name, Princeton, when the real community was Stony Brook. I don't know about when Kingston was designated, but initially this crossroads was called Queenston or Queenstown. It is one of the 2 or 3 earliest intersections in Princeton. It predates the College of New Jersey in Princeton. It predates the Revolution in Princeton. It has to do with the period when there were Dutch settlers coming in from Long Island and Quakers coming up from Philadelphia, who must have nodded to each other, not speaking the same language, as they passed on the road in front of this site. The Dutch were represented very early. Possibly the earliest building in what's now Princeton is the Gulick House near Kingston, which is on maps drawn in the 1780s. It initially belonged to Barefoot Princeton. It was in the Gulick House in the 1780s that the Keith Line, which became the division between East and West Jersey, was established. The Horner House, on the other hand, on the northeast corner of this intersection, the Horner House is of Quaker origin. Oddly enough, they actually crossed the 2 Jerseys. Most of the Quaker settlement was in West Jersey, most of the Dutch in East Jersey. Here, because of that highway, they crossed. The first Horner, dated in this area, bought property in 1695. But this house was older than the house that we talked about back in May at 344 across what is now North Harrison. I call it the John Scott House because it was that during the Revolution when it probably had its greatest fame. One of the earliest features, which predates the house on the other side of Harrison, is that in this case the kitchen was in the cellar, and the kitchen fireplace still exists in the cellar. The bake oven, the opening to the bake oven is still there as well. Supposedly there's a date from about 1730 carved in the wooden lintel over that fireplace. I can't find it, but I did go in last spring and I measured the cellar and I measured the first floor, and I wanted to know more about what was original. The stone, I think, is probably quarried stone that's been stuccoed over. Whether it was I say quarried, it was probably field stone. It probably predates the quarry, which was actually just down the road behind the present firehouse. In any event, because it's parged, it's very difficult to know. However, some of the earliest houses, the barracks being another, are stone in Princeton before there were quarries, before there were brick houses. During the Revolution, as I said, it belonged to John Scott, and it figured at that point, not just because of the Battle of Princeton, but because in 1783, because of an epidemic in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress was seeking a place to meet during that late summer and into fall, at the very tail end of the Revolution. Trenton wanted them to relocate there, Princeton wanted it here. In order to gain this large assemblage in a small town, they drew up an agreement which was signed by 47 different property owners offering spaces in their houses for members of the Continental Congress. We lost one about 5 years ago to the same developers who twice petitioned for major alterations to 344, the Horner House, through a series of mistakes. That house was torn down. That's one of the other houses offered that's still extant, or was until about 6 years ago. But this is another. The John Scott House was offered, and from every indication, it was occupied by one of the founders of our country, one of the members of the Continental Congress. We can't prove that, but it only adds to its significance, not only as an historic structure representing the first years of settlement in Princeton, but to one of its most important periods in its history. And I want you to keep that in mind, because the decisions that are being made here in many instances have to do with original fabric that has survived throughout that whole history of this building. By the time we came to consider either of these buildings in what became Jugtown after after a brickyard was established there, we were looking at what had happened to 338 a few years before. That's a much later house, but in many ways, the decisions that were made on that house were favorable to the sorts of things that we look for. The proportions, first of all, the original house stands still facing the street, still on the landscape portion of Nassau Street. The addition, which is larger than the original, is positioned behind it, and the roof line is kept low enough that it's really not visible from the street at all. The choice of the roof line, of the 6/6 windows, those are things which are determined by what was part of the original house. And I think all of those were factors that we were pleased to accept when we approved those initial designs. Only later did I realize the name of the person who was responsible for that, Bill King. And it's Bill King who's the applicant for this project here. I started off with the greatest expectation that he had real recognition of the importance of historic structures and the way in which historic structures can be altered and changed. I finally met him this spring. I hadn't met him until after we started this discussion about 344. I wanted to talk to him because it turned out that he not only owns 338, but he has a major interest in the building across the street, which used to be called Queens Court, and most recently was Graves Architectural Firm. Only then did I find out that he had spent most of his career in Princeton. He came to Princeton through Ray Bowers, who was a prominent builder and a longtime resident and generous benefactor in Princeton for many, many years. He was on the board of the YMCA with my father when he was the president of that board way back in the 50s when they were designing the present YMCA. He was, later on, it turns out Bill was also on that same board, knew my father, and as I said, was brought here by Ray Bowers. So again, it affirmed my decision that I liked the guy and I expected great things in his application for this property. Clifford Zink, who unfortunately is in London tonight, and Kathy Knight, who I thought would be here, and I met with Bill back in May, I think it was, sharing our reactions to the possible development of 344 and seeking some notion as to what he wanted to do with 342. What he mentioned then was he wanted to incorporate this smaller building in the backyard, and he described it as something like a wagon house. And I said, well, you know, I'm in the business I could probably provide a wagon house that would be of that size. I described the dimensions, and in fact, that's what we started with. If that had gone through, I would be recusing myself. As it turns out, it didn't, and I'll tell you how that happened. The most important thing to me was that that new building, whatever building it was, would be separated enough, not just physically, but in terms of the materials that are available and whatever, that it would register as an old building, but it wouldn't register as an original part of the main structure here. Anyway, we discussed all of that. The building in question that I was talking about was a 16 by 22 foot Dutch framed wagon house corn crib that we took down in 2006. Dutch? Well, yes. In fact, the small wing on 342 is Dutch framed as well. One half of the house is Quaker, the other half is Dutch. So it seemed like a good juxtaposition. In any event, Bill is a very busy guy. He's got projects all over the well, not just the West, but in Europe as well. Is that where he is tonight?
Specifically, I don't.
Okay, but that's.
You seem to know more about him than me.
Anyway, we dropped our discussions in July, but the two of us had spent 3 hours just enjoying each other's company and whatever. He asked then whether or not he could bring in his architect, and in terms of being an architect of record and having discussions about design, I had no problem with that. I did ask that the drawings and the model that I had provided him be shared with the architect, and then in turn, any designs which have been created would be shared with me. The reason why I'm not recusing myself is that neither the building nor any of the suggestions I made are reflected in any of the material that has been presented this evening. I wanted to discuss my reaction as a member of HPC. We, of course, I did not get any plans. I don't know whether my plans were shared at all because they're not reflected at all in the designs we've seen. However, my expectation was Bill said he would be back here in December. Unfortunately, because he's working in the Isle of Guernsey, I think, this week, he's not here. But in any event, we were supposed to be meeting about the Hillier project this and another special meeting here in December. That got postponed, and when it got postponed, Bill's plan was advanced to be vetted this evening. And as soon as I heard that, I got in touch with him, and I said, I haven't even seen the other plans. When are you going to be back? He said, the 9th of December. I said, we have to discuss this. This is not a conceptual hearing here. This is the real thing. This is something we vote on, and once it's voted on, that's it. You have to start all over again. Oh, no. We can make changes after the fact. I said, no, Bill, we can't make changes after the fact. That would, if I were you, I would see if you can make this a hearing about the possibilities of the project rather than the final plan. That has not been the case. We have seen a lot of architects here, and few of them really get historical architecture, are really fascinated by old buildings and the discoveries you can make when you really scrutinize them. They are aware of materials that are appropriate. They look for evidence where it doesn't exist, so that anything which is missing from the original fabric can, at least, if it's replaced, be replaced correctly. I've seen none of that here. These are two timber frames. I'm mentioning the wagon house, even though it's been taken off the table by my dictate, my suggestion. but because it's a timber frame, and so is the internal structure of 342. I see no comprehension of what timber framing is all about. There's not, in the plans for the addition, there's not one single timber shown in its original location. The doors are not where the doors were located. The windows are not where the windows were located. The roof line has been changed. It's a Dutch frame. It is a series of H vents, anchor vents, which is the basic format of a Dutch building. That's been completely ignored if the plans were ever sent to the architect. I don't know. To my mind, it doesn't make any attempt to accommodate Princeton history and the validity of the original building. It doesn't seem to address the neighborhood, and it doesn't seem to address the streetscape. Witness the building jutting almost out to the sidewalk. The placement is immediately behind the original main building, and it blocks out most of the light coming into that building. It's so close to the building that there's this strange configuration between the two, but they don't relate at all. The scale, it's lost. The proportions, because none of the apertures are where they should be. Nothing. The materials, it's stuccoed to make it look like the main house. It should be, in my view, it should not be the same material. It should be different. It should be differential, different materials, different aspects. So it's obvious that it's not part of the original. Landscaping, all that surface landscaping around the periphery is just, it's wrong. It's not the sort of thing that would go around a wagon house. It's not appropriate. It's too close to Harrison Street. I've mentioned that. I played with this enough to my sense was you would push it back so it would relate more to the size, scale, and proportions of the addition, the Dutch addition on the original house, and it would leave the area immediately behind the stuccoed building open with light and some sense of landscaping between the building and the street. I honestly think the placement is mistaken. Let me see if I can get through this. The main house. I know this is near and dear to Bill's heart, but that front entry is monstrous. The material is masonry. He says he went around and photographed about 30 buildings with masonry stoops. That's fine, but did he select buildings which had any bearing on a structure built this early? No. And there are structures that are available throughout the area which with probing in the stucco might reveal original placement. None of that's been done. The treads are too deep. They're 12 inches deep. The materials, the brick, the slate, the metal, all of that is not correct for the period. The metal railings apparently die into the shutters. I don't know quite how that's supposed to terminate, but it's awkward. I know the shutters were replaced in 1974 because my business partner is the one who did them. I'm almost done. I believe me. I'm sorry, but what's more, we have no purview over the interior, but I bring up the interior because there have been major structural changes there, which will not work with a oak timber frame. For some reason, I know because Bill doesn't like those stairs, the staircase has been extended down toward the central doorway in the parlor in the front room. To do that, you would have to change the timber frame underneath that floor, on the second floor, the floor to the attic. There's no sense of the ramifications of one decision that gets passed on, and it's a timber frame. These are timbers which are, this is a wooden timber frame. It's the wooden timber frame which was part of this building from the time it was built over, 250 years ago. This is a bad attitude, and I think we deserve better. I just don't. I'm going to cut out some of this, but this project has to be reviewed. I speak for myself, but I hope that my compatriots here recognize the fact that there are just too many inadequacies here, and that there has to be a lot more attention paid to the historical and architectural significance of this building. Appreciate your time. Sorry to take so much of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elric. I'd like to open up the floor to the other commission members' comments, especially regarding the historic house and the addition. You want to go ahead? You have to talk into the microphone because it's especially important because our lawyer had to leave, and so he's going to be watching the video. In order for him to hear it on the video, he has to be able to hear us, and it's only through the microphones.
Okay, I'm going to make a couple of comments that I hope are useful. I like and respect that, a lot of effort was put into this. In particular, I like that indent where the hyphen is to kind of separate the old from the new. That's a classic separation that I think works in a lot of places. The scale of the addition, well, putting it in perspective, compared to some other projects that have been brought to us, feels good and not overwhelming, and I think that's very encouraging. But I think it's actually more about the details this time. And the details always make a difference. Let me start with some observations. One is about the proposed color scheme being based off of the building next door, which is a different period, a different style, a different time. I don't quite understand the desire or the belief that that's the right thing to be doing. I think it should come to its own color scheme, and color is also one of those things that can be changed and made better or changed with more research. Number 2 on my list here is the addition, I think, is actually trying to be larger and finer than a structure that would then have the carriage doors on the back of it. I think actually they should have doors that relate to humans and not trying to be that the space is a barn or something separate from what I didn't know that Elric was going to say. There's a problem that really jumps out to me, and I call it the band of stone veneer that's like a base around a lot of this new construction part of it, and I don't know where it actually comes from. The stone that's on the site that kind of looks like it might be trying to relate to is to a new back porch that dates to within the last 20 years of the building, and to the garden retaining wall that the Department of Public Works put up less than 10 years ago. I think that is a detail not to be repeated into the new section of the building. And I really do like and admire the idea of pushing the entrance back another 27 feet. I think that, you get gold stars for that. And if the carriage house doors were to remain, what goes up to them? Is it going to have like like the idea that you'd be taking animals in and out or carriages in and out. They just kind of end there, and that makes them feel very made up or kind of false. Those are my comments. I hope they're useful in some way. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Are there other questions or comments? Yes, please go ahead.
So thank you very much for all the effort coming into this. I want to just say how much I appreciate my colleagues' historical comments. It's so important to us as a board to have this deep knowledge as we do. And so, Ulrich, I'm very grateful for your comments, particularly about the reference to the Scott House and the possibility that founding fathers may have lived in that house. So that highlights the historic importance. For me, my thoughts are probably much more prosaic, but I have a couple of things in mind. One is relating to some of the outdoor construction and relating to the other element that may influence, but it's not our purview, but it's something we always have to consider. And so I first would like to ask a question to Elizabeth. Is this particular property within the overlay of the affordable housing overlay? It is. Okay, so affordable housing is then a secondary but important concern. Secondary but important concern is the affordable housing piece. For the addition, what is the square footage of the footprint of the addition, please?
It's approximately 500 square feet.
500 square feet. So what I'm thinking is sometime in the future, whether there would, or I should first ask, are there any apartments in either of these buildings? There are. One apartment perhaps, is it?
In the existing building, there's one apartment, yes.
And that would be in 338 perhaps?
338, I think there are two.
No, there's one in, the corner building has an
One has-
apartment,
okay.
and there are several in the
So my
338.
concern is simply a remote one, but that is, would there ever be an opportunity to create more affordable housing on this particular property? Not in this plan, so I would surmise, but there could come a time when you would be asked or would figure to put an extension on the top of the addition that you are suggesting now. Are the plans here contemplating any possibility structurally that could be done?
No, at this point, it's just a one-story structure.
Okay, so just giving that some consideration. My other thought is about the courtyard. I didn't quite understand this, and I'm wondering how does this integrate with the historicity of the property? And then you put up the picture of the Nassau Panera Bread courtyard, and then I thought, wow, that is just not at all consistent with the history or the shape or styling or aspect of the neighborhood. I would hardly wish to see a fountain, an Italian Florentine fountain, with thick cobble bricks and so on, in the passageway between these two buildings. That would be, at least to me, very jarring as a moderately interested, historically minded local citizen. So I don't know, and I appreciate the desire to try to integrate and hyphenate the two buildings together, but I'm not sure I don't know how a fountain will play into the historicity of the property. Small aspect. Elizabeth mentioned the curbing, Belgian block curbing, cement curbing. If there is to be curbing, I'm just looking at the thank you picture in your presentation, and I see that there's just bluestone curbing. Something like that would be more muted and historic, but even no curbing might be better just to make it historic. Okay, so I think these are my main comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Anything else? I'll just put in my 2 cents. I agree that the historic nature of the house 342, I feel like is not really being understood, and that the addition is more of a detraction, as it doesn't really relate at all to the neighborhood, to the house, and that there seems like a disconnect between the neighborhood and the stonework proposed, that it's not really in keeping with the what's going on in the rest of the area. So, and to David's point, perhaps there could be a sort of a technical process to find out the original colors of the house and at least have that understanding of what it might have been originally. That's possible. The front steps, I agree, putting stonework isn't appropriate, and this is a very important house that I feel needs to be maintained in this district. So my recommendation is to come back for a concept review, which we do for free and very often, and working out maybe some things beforehand. But my sense is I don't feel like you guys are ready to go to the planning board. Any other comments? Otherwise, oh, go ahead.
I just have a comment on, really I agree with everything everybody else said. And one of the first things that we learned in design school was do your research on the building. And occasionally I see, and you know, I'm sure a lot of work went into this. You know, you see one sheet of drawing and nobody else knows what it took to get that one sheet of drawing. So I appreciate the work. But that was the first thing I learned. I know more about allergies than I want to know because of a project. So that's the first thing that I feel is supposed to be done, especially a historic building. And as everybody said, it definitely seems so disconnected and just random that, you know, you would put barn doors on the back and the drawings aren't really clear where exactly parking will go. You know, there's all sorts of distractions on the drawings. And yeah, I think coming back for a concept review would be a good thing because it's a small structure and it seems like an afterthought, but it's a very historic building and it needs to be respected.
All right, Roger?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things. Elizabeth talked about how busy the current courtside design of, I guess it's the west-facing facade of the addition is, and it does try to mimic too closely the 6/6 lights. I would say that you could look to 338 for some good examples of how a new structure was put up that doesn't exactly mimic the old structure, but references it. I'm looking at the east facade of 338, where there's a wooden door with two side lights, which is like nothing else in that building, but it fits in because of the size and the scale of the opening and the lights in a way that is seems appropriate to the new building and the old building. It's not an easy thing to do to make it new construction that both reveals itself as new but fits in scale-wise and in appropriateness with the old building. But you've got a great example next door, I think.
Thank you. Other commission members, I think?
I have two
Yeah, oh,
questions.
Elric has more.
First of all, as been brought up before, that the buildings should be treated differently. To paint them all the same color is like a corporate campus. And the whole thing about a neighborhood is that each building has some personality of its own, and I'm all in favor of that. But the more serious thing that I forgot to mention, structurally, I thought we laughed when we first heard about it last spring, when Bill said, oh, this back wall, I'm just going to have this knocked out. It's a stone wall on the first floor, and it still shows up in some of the documents we received, that between the one window near the corner fireplace and the other side of that room, there's a 10-foot opening, and there's no provision, oh, don't please bring up steel, that, to support the rest of the building, and that is original fabric, and that does deal with the outside surface. That's enough.
All right. At this point, I think I'll open it to the public comment. Did you want to go to the microphone? Thanks.
Hi, is that on? Yeah, okay,
Yep,
hi.
it's
So
good.
I'm the member of the public. Hi, I'm speaking as another neighbor of the directly impacted by these properties who hasn't come up yet. I apologize for coming late. I came directly from Manhattan to attend the meeting and missed, unfortunately, the first part of the presentation. But there's a number of us who live on Evelyn Place, where our properties are directly adjacent to these two properties.
Apologies, I hate to interrupt, but I think we should, if someone could
Yes.
swear her
Yeah,
in
oh, could
and
you
get
give
her name
your-
for the record.
Could you give
Of
your
course, my name
name?
is Julia Masnak.
Could you spell your
Together,
last
Julia,
name?
Julia, last name Masnak, Mastnak. And together with Princeton University, I own 3 Evelyn Place. And then I'm also here speaking on behalf of my neighbors at 1 Evelyn Place and neighbors at 3 Evelyn Place and other neighbors who we've been in conversation with but haven't had a chance to be here. And I'll say,
We're actually not allowed to take testimony
Fine.
from anyone but you for
obviously,
you.
obviously,
So-
I'm just mentioning that we're all in conversation
Okay.
because other names have been mentioned of our neighbors who we also talked to who are involved in Jugtown, who I also work with Kathy and others who we thought might be here today. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an architect, and I understand that some of the things that are of our concern might not be
swear her in?
directly relevant. Excuse me?
Oh, we have to swear her in. We have to swear her in. Julie, do you want to swear her in?
Sure.
I guess, I'm not a lawyer.
So is anyone here happen to be a notary or an attorney other than myself?
Oh, you
No,
know
you're
me.
it.
Can you
You're
do
it,
it,
Brian.
Brian?
All right, so if you...
Ryan, you know me. You've dealt with me a lot. You know me
I
very
do,
well.
I do. It's-
You know me
so-
personally, you
I
know my
do,
attorney, you
but-
know me very
so
well, you know who I am.
I'm just saying, I'm the only one in the room who's entitled to take oaths.
Sure.
So if you wouldn't mind raising your
No
hand,
problem.
say if you swear or affirm.
I swear or affirm.
Thank you.
Okay,
you.
yes. So just a few things about this. So some of us who live in historic buildings that are directly adjacent to this project and have been impacted by it in multiple ways over the years since this first began. And we haven't had a chance, so basically if there's, we haven't had a chance to see any drawings, or I only got something in the mail on Friday about this hearing, or maybe it was Thursday, I'm not sure which day. So we just had a rushed conversation back and forth. Has anyone seen anything? No one has. So at the very least, we'd like to see what's being proposed. I came here too late to at least see this presentation tonight. Because this all impacts on us in multiple ways. You know, we don't see on these drawings what's happened also below the ground, which I don't know is in the purview of the HRC, but a lot happened underneath the ground in 338 that impacted on us. We have, you know, gardens and buildings and basements that have been impacted by all sorts of things that I won't really get into here. I was also wondering, because I don't know if this came up before, and this may not be HRC, but is there a shift in the amount of permeable and impermeable cover of the land with the change of the parking lots? I don't know. That's something that's of concern, because I remember that being a key concern in the original permit, however many years ago that was. Yeah, and so sometimes it feels like there's been a number of kind of rezoning by amendment. Again, I'm not an expert, excuse me if I'm getting the words wrong, like when a industrial strength generator was going to be put on my neighbor at number 1's property line, and we had, you know, we kind of fought that back. This is a residential neighborhood. This is our historic street on Evelyn that is directly impacted by changes that are being preserved, and we just want to make sure that our voice is also, or our at least eye on things, is at least taken into account as part of what's underway here. In terms of affordable housing, I don't believe that was accurate about 3 apartments being in 338. Just, again, my vague memory of that. I'm not sure that that was correct, but not my direct concern. All that we ask, or I ask personally for myself as a directly adjacent neighbor, is that we have a chance to review and look at what's going on and to have our input being taken into consideration. These are historic homes that are impacted by these decisions being taken by you and by King Enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I mean, for the record, the plans that we have are on the website,
Yeah,
on
The-
the
the-
municipal website for this meeting.
right, so the website does have a link to the meeting materials. But we appreciate your comments, thank you. I don't think there's anyone else here from the public, so thank you for speaking. I think we'll go close public comment and go back to our board deliberations. Elizabeth, did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
I think that the comments that came from HPC were pretty much unified. I'm just wondering if the applicant's attorney knows if the applicant would be considered come back to HPC for review for some of the changes that you talked about that you'd be willing to do, and maybe anything else?
Well, I suspect that we're going to be needing to make changes once we see comments from the planning board, but ultimately, our goal would be to get your comments so that they could be considered. One particular area where there seems to be a bit of a, maybe there's some unanimity on this side of the dais, but very different from the memo, is as to color. So I think I heard from everyone on your side of the table that the consistency of the corners is perhaps not the concern, but the desire would be to create a historic independent color scheme, if I had that right, but that I think otherwise the comments were generally consistent between the recommendations and what I heard here today. But that was one area where it was definitely different, or possibly different, and I would like to clarify if that's possible.
I think we were just suggesting that we'd have information on perhaps doing a color analysis of the building at 342, so that we might have known what its original facing was. Yes.
I would like to say one thing about color. And I believe it was mentioned by perhaps David, Mr. Shore, that to try to unify the color between those two buildings, I don't think is important, or it's not necessary, and it shouldn't be, because it's almost saying, okay, I own both these properties because we have the same color, or because our driveway connects, and because our parking lot is unified. I think it's actually important to see them as separate buildings which are identified to their period, which is not the same. So that's just generally the comparison between the color between those two buildings.
Okay,
Tom.
appreciate the clarification. I was reading your initial comment.
No,
differently.
but I felt that the color was important. I know that when it was changed to the darker one, everyone was pretty surprised because it really had the unity of those four buildings were kind of emphasized that intersection. But if the commission is saying that they feel that maybe they just want to know what the real color is, what was the true color? I mean,
Thank you.
All right.
My
Tom?
question is to you, Madam Chair, and that is to ask, are we going to be asked tonight to then make either an up or down recommendation to the planning board, or do we have the possibility, if the clients so agree, to delay until there's further development from their side to bring back to us?
I think that's up to the applicant. So,
My request would be to get the comments in the form of a memo so we could try to address them. That would be my request.
So
All right.
is that to say that they're asking us to vote this, to recommend or not to the planning board tonight?
yes.
yes.
Okay.
All right. So,
I'm just wondering if we should go through the list, because a lot of these things weren't touched upon. These are the comments I made for HPC, and just so we could get it on record and perhaps on the memo too.
Okay.
If we could go through those if the commission was okay with it. So one of them has to do with, I think that there was an agreement that the commission felt that the position of the building is better if it's pushed away from North Harrison Street, and perhaps even partly attached to the west wing, but definitely pushed away so the historic building can be more visible and prominent. Is that correct? I'm just trying to go through,
I mean, I think the main emphasis of Elric's points is, number one, the addition isn't, as it's designed right now, isn't acknowledging or appropriate to the historic building. And the second thing is that the introduction of new materials to the historic building is also not appropriate. And I think
Right.
the third thing is that we know more about the history of the exterior color of the house. And I think the fourth thing is that there's not a real understanding of the backyard layout with the fountain.
of the
that
side yard.
This is not really a clear concept, and that, so there's not enough clarity.
Okay, I think the first one where we talked about that, when you said that it's not appropriate, I guess maybe what we need to provide a little bit more information about that for the memo.
Well, yeah, Elric was saying that a clad wooden building, that it didn't necessarily have to be a stucco building.
So non-repetitiveness of existing material, make it different, just like the Secretary Interiors.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to mimic it, so you don't want there any confusion to be what's originally historic and what the addition is. So that's why oftentimes you'll see a building that the material is different, but the proportions work out. They might use a similar roof, like a gable roof, however.
Definitely understood,
Okay.
both in concept and actually very much appreciate, Madam Chair, how you expressed it there. I think that's a very clear direction for us. Much appreciated.
Okay, is there anything else?
And then the window treatment, I don't think anyone was very happy with, of the addition.
Okay, proportionately, the style?
Proportionally, and also the style. So that the guidance would be to look at actually what happened next door at 338, that addition has new windows and doors that are harmonious with the historic building.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I believe that the barn doors, those are just inappropriate, right? I mean, the style doesn't go with it, and... Okay, and how about the other door, which was the door with the transom and the side light? Same as the
Right.
window?
Yeah.
Okay.
Apologies, just so I can understand that last,
Yeah, well, yeah.
apologies, the interior, the door facing 338 with the transom, I just want to make sure I got that.
Yes, the west
covered.
side, yeah,
Yes.
that's got the 12 pane, and then, and it's got the multi-pane transom, and then the side light, which is also multi-pane.
So I guess the comment would be to simplify that treatment, is that? Okay, thank you, just want to make sure I got it.
Yep.
And then, I'm just trying to list things that we can help Mr. Herbert pinpoint the comments that he wants to add to the memo. As far as the plaza area goes, that's just something that's not appropriate for this historic district.
Well, I think it's the materials and the geometry used.
And is it also
Are-
the fountain, too?
Yeah, well, yeah, but,
There is one comment that I wanted to touch on. There is a very large walkway, I believe it's like 15 feet wide, that goes from 338 Nassau, from their side door, that is their cross-access to 342. So, I mean, I'm just wondering why does that have to be so wide? And it is the pavers.
yeah, that's true. And as a positive, we thought moving the entrance away from the intersection of Nassau and Harrison would be a positive, and also allowing traffic on both sides, because that corner really gets jammed up. So if they could exit on, I mean, exiting that property is difficult at rush hour. It's just plain difficult. So I think having more options or keeping it away from the intersection is
Okay,
better.
so the positive is the relocation of the driveway north, right?
Away from
the
Harrison.
intersection, okay.
Yeah.
I think away from Harrison. Harrison, I mean, it takes, I don't even know how long to get.
Right. Well, the traffic backs up pretty
On
bad on
Harrison.
that road.
And again, the
Whereas-
planning board will be dealing with a lot of these
Yeah.
other issues. I think I want to focus mostly on the historic qualities, because I think that's the benefit we give is to advise on this aspect of the application.
Okay, we're going to get to it later, but there's a list of variances and waivers that I made recommendations on. But one of them, the recommendations, or I believe that it's a requirement, design requirement, that they require parking and driveways to be paved, right? I mean, my thought is that gravel is more appropriate if it's allowed versus paving it.
Right. I
We would
mean,
certainly agree with that.
yeah, I think there'll probably be a whole other discussion on stormwater and what is pervious and impervious.
But I
and
mean, visually,
how to deal
historic,
with
for a historic district, I would think that,
the gravel.
If we could just clarify, because I think there may have been a confusion on our part about your recommendation. So the recommendation of the board, I guess, on that is that gravel is probably appropriate? Is that?
that's my opinion.
Okay.
I feel that
I think
it's
we
more,
we may
yeah.
have honestly
because
read
it-
your memo differently than.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they were saying that you need maybe I wrote it wrong. I understand, yes. Okay.
Oh, appreciate the clarification there. Okay.
Right. So anyway, I think Elric went over a lot of the disconnect
Okay.
that we all found between the historic property and the changes.
Can we talk about the
And we would-
curbing, which is proposed with Belgian block?
Curbing, yeah, we would not support Belgian block.
Okay.
Um,
If it was required, would you prefer concrete, slate, asphalt?
I mean, I think we've recommended concrete for 388, or 338, so,
They didn't have any curbing.
Right.
The zoning board made them put curbing in.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So okay.
But they, yeah. So does the
Again-
commission agree that Belgian block is not supported and that they prefer concrete, or
I think maybe the word to say it is simpler.
simpler the better?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just see here. We talked about the curbing, and the applicant presented a preservation map. Is that something that the commission agrees with, or because there's really nothing in there that talks about the back? There's no preservation behind the building. And one of the comments, obviously, that Elric made is that there should be, the reason that that addition is not appropriate is because it is not giving the visibility of the back of the building.
I almost heard that.
Right. I mean, I definitely think that we would be open to seeing various approaches. But, yeah, we would, in general, it seemed like we're just looking at this application, and in this particular case,
Right.
it
But if-
was
but the-
infringing on the historic.
Right, so, but for this one, for the preservation area map, what would you envision to be included in the back, if anything?
I mean, the reality is there are vistas on at least 2, if not 3 sides of the building. So like Elric was saying, we usually go with the streetscape and encourage additions to be in the back, but since this is so visible, there's really nowhere to go. You have to,
But obviously, where the building is proposed right now is not acceptable. So I'm just wondering, is there going to be a section that's carved out where HBC is going to say, this preservation map should contain 10 feet, 15 feet from the building and inside the property to be able to protect that historic area within the building to be able to retain that historic character?
well, I don't know. I mean, what do people think? I mean, should a building, an addition be allowed to connect with the historic building, or?
I think it
Well,
has to
I-
be
I-
connected,
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
that it's where it's connected. I think that's the
but
thing.
it has to have some distance to it. And there are, I'll share plans if I did draw up an alternative, which might be of interest.
Okay, but I think that we need to have it so we can talk about it, because the applicant's going to want to know what's going to be presented.
Just one, I mean, the current porch and the stairs are not historic or historic looking. I mean-
Roger, can you talk in your microphone? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying, I'm looking at a picture of the rear of the building, the north-facing part of the building. And currently, that's not a historic.
Right, the back is not, yeah, I mean.
The existing conditions are not anything to
Right.
write home about. I mean,
Yeah, the treatment of the back of the building is not necessarily,
I mean, and the top story is kind of vernacular. That's not, there's a big disjunction between the front of the back and the back. So, I mean, I could see something being accommodated in the back.
right, yeah,
I
I
understand.
think there's a flexibility there. We're not sure.
Yeah, and I think it would be an improvement could be an improvement over the current conditions.
Right. Sure. Sorry.
So I just want to note again that we're talking about the back as if it doesn't impact anyone else, but that impacts directly on the property lines and of the historic homes on Evelyn. My property in particular shared with Princeton University is one of those. So it's not as if it's not impacting on anyone because it's in the back of this particular building. And then also, maybe not the HRC directly, but there was much discussion about what could and could not happen in the back current parking lot and what was allowed and was not allowed at the time of the original permit. So I just want to note that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I do feel like the whole, that whole area in the back is very much exposed and very much affects the rest of the street. So absolutely, we agree that that has a high impact, what happens behind and to the side of the
Ryan, could you put that
342.
map up again? The one that you had the,
To show up on the screen, but I don't have that button.
You're sitting 3 feet from me, and I can't understand anything when you're speaking into that microphone.
Oh, really?
Do we have that image in the package?
And we could have been sitting around one table.
I know. We could have been understanding each other really well. So,
Are we thinking of like the image that's called
With
figure
food.
18?
I just want the commission to recall what that area was. So if you're going to agree with it, then, we want to be clear, but if you feel there should be a different delineation, then we should talk about it now, because if that should be part of the presentation in the memo to the planning board, because if the HPC says, well, we feel that it should include part of the rear and side area, then it gives the applicant a better indication on where appropriately they should place that building. But if we just say, well, we can talk about it, that doesn't give them guidance.
Well, I mean, there have been significant changes to that facade.
Right. And I think that, I think there's something about a structure that's solid and a structure that's open to the way it impacts the historic building.
The slide that's
Oh,
up
there
on
it
the screen
is.
now is the site plan that has the proposed area that has the front and side yards and the rear line of the building is how we.
So it's the green line, right, Brian? So it
correct.
goes along the front and side of the property line, and then it cuts right to the face of the most projecting part of the building, and then goes
Correct.
straight across, basically.
Is it two separate properties still?
No, just one.
But, sorry, both properties are separately owned and
Yes.
and titled. They haven't merged, if that was the question.
And is the merging going to be part of this application or no?
No,
So there are no setbacks between the two properties,
correct.
because they're not. Okay.
Okay, so
Makes it
there's
easy.
a historic preservation area, which they're recommended. What? No. No, so the top road is North Harrison, and the right is Nassau. I mean, it's, you don't. Yeah, so the one that might be impacted is where it says 388 existing building, that's the adjacent property.
At 338.
338,
And then
I'm sorry,
behind,
I
it's
think
only
I saw
partially
that.
shown. The other residential properties would be below off-screen. This just shows there's no work proposed or changes to that part of the site.
Right, but it's right next to one,
Right, the part of the plan that does not involve any changes is next to that property. That's correct.
All right.
And so, what do we think?
So anyway, I just think that our recommendation to the planning board should be that we would ask the applicant to approach the addition differently informed by our discussion, and that especially the front approach of the house, the historic house should not, the porch where they were going to put the slate and all that should be reconsidered.
And I think the applicant already agreed that they would replace in kind if needed for the front porch. Is that correct? Was that the comment made?
Yes, if it can be salvaged, that'd be fine.
No, I know,
I was confused before. I thought maybe they put the ramp in and we're changing the door.
So,
Are there other comments or questions? If not, I think we'll just wrap this up then.
Madam Chair, can I just go over some of these variances and waivers that, with the recommendations?
So at this point, we would not recommend the variances,
Any of them?
except for changing the entrance.
Okay, I don't think that that was a variance.
No, okay.
Okay. So, but you're saying that you're not going to recommend any of the variances or design waivers?
Correct, given the discussion. Any other questions? All right, so thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming. We really appreciate your input. We hope we'll be seeing you again.
Have some food.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
happy
you.
holidays.
Thank you. All right, so that was the last item on, as far as applications. We do have more public comment time available for other issues if you want to tell us anything else. Other than that, we're going to go to a staff report.
I just want the HBC to know that the RFP was issued, and we had received 4 proposals from consultants, and the subcommittee has selected one, which will be presented as a recommendation to the mayor and council at their Thursday meeting this week. So we are hoping for that to be supported for HBC, and if they are, we're very excited because she's the best of the best when it comes to site guidelines. So,
Right, so we're really hopeful we'll get that approved. Any other reports? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, Tom.
Second.
Okay, and I'll second. Thank you so much, everybody. We're done. Yeah, let's eat.